God bless you. God bless you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are around the world. I, of course, have been getting a lot of questions and comments around, the COVID vaccine, and people ask me what my thoughts are. So I'm putting together this brief video. I'm sure, as other times where I talk about anything related to anything like this, for whatever reason it gets very controversial. However, I'm going to share some of my thoughts from a biblical perspective and also from a scientific perspective, and you can do whatever you want or whatever you will with that. So should Christians take the COVID-19 vaccine? So that becomes a question because many people feel like the pandemic and the vaccination push and the whole thing is like straight out of the book of Revelation, and that this is, really the end because of what they're pushing and what they're doing. So there are a lot of people that are really believing that, hey, you shouldn't take it because this vaccine is the mark of the beast, and things like that. I'm going to discuss that, and I'm also going to discuss where we are and why this is important. So why do people say that? So I'll go to Revelation 13, where people talk about, or where the scripture rather talks about the mark of the beast, and I'm going to give you my take on it. Again, I do not have the mainstream theological persuasion concerning the end times. I still am going to do that video for you all on the four views of the end times and eschatology, but I'm working on some other videos right now. But once I get around to that, I will put it out very quickly for you to digest and think about and reflect on your own things, because sometimes we inherit interpretations that we have not studied ourselves, and so it's important to think through these things and take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. But anyway, let us look at Revelation 13 very briefly. You should be able to see my screen, which has a scripture starting at we'll start at verse 11. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, and even making fire come down from heaven in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of it, the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes, key verse, also it causes both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This is wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of the man, and his number is 666. All right, so this is the key verse that many use to say, hey, we are in the end times, and they are trying to actually give us the mark of the beast by way of excuse of this pandemic. So I actually want to unpack that a bit. So the notion, the notion that because a lot of people are taking a vaccine does not really fit in the context of this theological viewpoint. And I actually don't hold the mainline theological viewpoint that many hold on this, and I'll get to that in another video. But however, if I did, it still does not fit, right? That narrative does not fit with this verse, right? So this mark and all of this is connected to worship, right? This is connected to worshiping the beast. This is directly connected to a willingness to worship or not to worship, right? And by consequence of worshiping or not worshiping, we have, right, this requirement to take this to take this mark, right? And if you don't have the mark, then you can't buy or sell anything. So in our context, right, we're not dealing with anyone trying to get anybody to worship anything. Furthermore, the vaccine is not going in the right hand or the forehead. No one is taking a syringe or taking a needle or anything and putting it in people's foreheads and leaving a mark. They're not even putting it in the right hand, right? That's not where things are being administered. So just from taking those bits of information, the narrative that the COVID-19 vaccine is the mark of the beast just really does not fit into kind of this narrative that is being presented by many of our brothers and sisters. So I respectfully disagree on that regard. So now many focus, on this, phrase here, right? It causes all, right, both small and great, right? It causes them to, take this mark. So the kind of logic is that some emergency or some reason, right, must be the cause for me to surrender my will, surrender my desire, and just take this mark or take this. However, when you look at what's happening around the world, particularly in the United States, like half of the population is still not vaccinated, right? So there is no stating that you have to take the vaccine, right? No one is going around lunging needles into people's arms, right? And you have people around the world who don't have access even to vaccines. So if this was some real coordinated plot or conspiracy, they're really failing terribly because actually the significant population of the world can't even access the vaccine. So if this was the devil creating this thing for people to take it, he's really not good at logistics, because we have you also have to think about the international relations context of this conversation, right? There is debate between the developed economies and the developing economies about, right, intellectual property rights to for the vaccine manufacturers, so that we can have a large enough distribution so that nations that have lower economies lower income economies can actually take the vaccines, right? So it's a complete utter failure in that sense. And so people talk about these verses usually in the context of a one world global government. Well, right now, literally, we have people dying all around the world from COVID-19, new variants continuing to come out. People are still dying, and nations are still debating about whether they're going to expand access to the vaccines or not. So if this was the context of this verse, then it's really a complete and utter failure, because we're not seeing governments work together. We're seeing rifts and contentions that existed before COVID-19 get sharper and get more stringent because nations are competing for resources, and different governments are focused on their own personal interest, the interests of their own personal people. So it's easy to live in America and say, because we have all these vaccines, we have so many vaccines that we're like, hey, look, we'll give the 12-year-olds the vaccines now, when you have billions of people around the world who are still competing for access to this. So you're not seeing some type of global collaboration and work to get people vaccinated. You are seeing debates. The WHO said the other day that we're in a I forgot the exact phrase they used, but essentially a complete moral failure because of the unwillingness of developed nations to expand access, and we're giving vaccines to kids who have a lower chance of contracting a severe response to COVID-19. So we're not dealing with the world in this crisis is not ripe for any one world government or thing like that. And furthermore, it appears that the more limited resources are, right, the more governments compete for their own interests, which means they are doing their own thing. They are less likely, right, to work together and to cooperate. So I don't see the context that we're in as a Revelation 13 context. I don't see it in that context. It's more divisive than bringing governments into some one world thing. So this has nothing to do with a mark of the beast. There's no marks going to be left on you. There's nothing touching your right hand or your forehead, right? It has nothing to do with those things. It's severely different. A lot of people say that this is a big experiment, but the reality is it's a big emergency. So in my line of work, I talk to constantly healthcare personnel, doctors, healthcare administrators, hospital presidents, all these things, constantly talking and learning from them and their experiences and how hospitals are dealing with things. And it's a lot. It's an emergency, especially if you are in now developing nations who don't have access to vaccines. It's an emergency. Now on to more of the science side. So we talked about, in my view of the scripture, I don't believe that this has anything to do with the mark of the beast or anything like that. It doesn't fit to me. Nobody's going to put a thing in your forehead or a thing in your right arm. That's just not the context that we're in. And everybody is too on edge and ready to fight anyway to let that happen. So I don't think that fits. Now, in terms of the vaccine itself, so let's look at how how trials were conducted and things like that. So I'm not going to go to any news. I'm going to go straight to the actual academic studies so that you can see things for yourself. So let's look at kind of how these things come about and how they're studied. So this is the one for the Moderna vaccine, and this is typical, right? So they do a trial to determine vaccine efficacy, and there's a difference between efficacy and effectiveness, and we'll talk about that in a second. So this trial enrolled 3,420 volunteers, okay? 3,420 volunteers, okay? They split them up, 15,210 into these groups, right? And so one group obviously gets the vaccine, and another group gets a placebo. And throughout the course of them going out and doing things, you see, right, if you compare the groups and see, you know, if one group really actually statistically fared better than the other. And right, so in this case, Moderna, right, showed a 94.1% efficacy at preventing COVID-19 illness, including severe disease. So any of your vaccines, right, when you read the studies, it will be a similar setup, right? A similar setup, a order of magnitude of around, you know, tens of thousands of patients, of people that are studying, that are in the trial, and the trial is split into two groups, and you see what's going on, right? So that's how the studies for efficacy are done. Now, what does efficacy mean? Efficacy essentially means how well a vaccine is at preventing the onset of an illness for a particular disease, and there can even be like subcategories in there, like levels of severity and levels of illness. But at high level, it's how much it's how well it is at preventing, right, an individual from getting, you know, said disease. Now, a lot of people say, hey, I'm not going to get the vaccine anyway because it's not 100% effective, right? You just showed me a 94.1% efficacy rate anyway, so why would I get that anyway? So that's not a new thing. All vaccines have a efficacy rate regardless of whatever the disease is, whatever the issue is. All vaccines have that. That's why even flu vaccines, right, they only have a 40 to 60% efficacy rate. No vaccine has a 100% efficacy rate. Now, then what happens after you release the vaccine into the world? You have another rate called the effectiveness rate. The effectiveness rate. When you're doing a clinical study, there's a limitation on the type of oh guys, I see you in the comments over there. Okay, y'all, I'll go over the flu. I'll go over the flu after this. When after a vaccine is released into the real world, right, you look for the effectiveness rate. Effectiveness is different than efficacy. Efficacy is based only on that trial. Effectiveness is right in the real world with everybody experiencing. People may be on different medications that may limit the vaccine's ability. People may have different life circumstances that weren't included in the trial. You may have more, it's a broader population, more variables, more things that a controlled clinical study can't examine. And so what they found so far, right, is that the COVID-19 vaccines are having still a strong effectiveness. However, it's still being studied and things may change, especially with the especially with the variants coming out. So I'll show you very quickly. Where's my screen? So here, right, this is a effectiveness study in Israel, right? So again, efficacy is only a controlled small group. Effectiveness is when we're getting out to everyone and we're looking and we're surveilling to seeing how well is this working or not working. So this is the Pfizer BNT. This is the Pfizer vaccine, right? And so they looked at two groups of 596,618 people, right? And so in this group with this particular nation, right, they found it consistent with the trial. In other words, it seems to have an effectiveness rate that's similar to if its efficacy rate in some respect. So that's pretty much what goes on with that. So you have thousands of people, millions of people taking the vaccines, and you can see what the different effects are. So which leads me right to, hey, side effects, right? That's what people think about, that's what people worry about, that's what people are concerned with, right? So pain, redness, swelling, especially around where you actually get the injection, if you so choose to take one. Then there's tiredness, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, chills, fever, nausea. This is what the majority of people experience. This is the majority in terms of the side effects, right, that people experience from the vaccine. There are some other more rare side effects. For instance, do I have this paper? I don't remember if I so like some people have shortness of breath, or they need an EpiPen and things like that, but this is in like the less than 100 in trials. I think it's like 20 something, so very, very rare out of millions of people. Even in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, right, people, so women under 50 experienced blood clots, and so they stopped it, or stopped at about it was 6 or 7 cases of that. So that is right 0.001%. So very, very cautious, very, very calm move from the what do you call it, from the federal authorities, right? So if something causes so if they want to stop something at a rate of 0.0001%, that lets you know that they're proceeding with extreme caution. So this is kind of the landscape of what's been going on. This is kind of the landscape of what's going on. So now, with respect to how the vaccine works, it's a relatively new technology. The Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines, and everybody thinks that a lot of different things about that, but you cannot get your news from random conspiracy theory websites and things like that. You have to make sure that you're sourcing your information properly. So I work in science. So you see, I'm showing you papers. I'm showing you direct papers and sources. So essentially, right, it carries in to your cells mRNA instructions that causes some cells in your body to produce the spike protein. The spike protein, right, those are the little things that you see pointing out when you see these images of the coronavirus. And so it causes your body to produce those, so that if you actually are infected, right, you have the ability to fight it if you are infected, right? So that is essentially how it works. That's essentially what is going on in your body at a high level. So many people, many people, right, are, let me see, okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand there's a lot of hesitancy. It's right. It's up to you. It's up to you. I'm just giving you, right, the scientific background and information. And right, so you even have to define very dangerous, right? What does very dangerous mean specifically, right? What does very dangerous mean specifically? What does very dangerous mean number-wise? What does very dangerous mean? So what we do know, right, is how COVID-19 has affected people. What we do know is how long COVID has affected people. What we do know is that this disease and its mutations and its variants, right, are very dangerous. So you have to define all of those things. You have to analyze all of those things. So at the end of the day, right, everyone has to make their own decision about what they're going to do with their bodies and what they're going to do with their lives. Some say, hey, I'm going to take it. Some say, hey, I'm not going to take it. Well, see, here's the thing. You say, so I'll put the comment so you can see it. What we do know is 99% of the people do not die. Right? Here's the limitation of that. Right? That's just like saying what we do know is 99% of people don't die. We can say 99% of people don't die from some cancer. Or from something. That does not mean the quality of life of those 99% of people is not severely impacted. It does not mean that those 99% of people, right, don't have to go on respirators. It does not mean that 99% of those people do not contract some type of severe illness or severe health symptoms, right? So particularly in the case of the United States, we had never seen, right, our healthcare system so overwhelmed, right? Record numbers of hospitalizations, ICU usage, all of those things, right? That had never been seen before. We were running out of doctors, running out of nurses, running out of all of those different things, right? So, just because death is not the penultimate quality of life, right? It's not the, like, oh, you got in a car accident, you didn't die. Most people don't die from car accidents, so we don't need to, you don't need to work with seat belts and things like that, because most people don't die from car accidents. There is a lower brain, right? And so, I see you're obviously a lot of people have different views about it, right? But I didn't give you anything from the news just now, right? So look at the sources that I just gave you. I didn't even give you anything from the news, and I work actively in this space. So I am talking daily to doctors, hospital administrators, and all of that because of some technologies that I'm working on. So I have experiential, and I'm giving you peer-reviewed, verified sources. So, we had never seen hospitals so overwhelmed. I'm not only a preacher. We had never seen such things, right, at the scale and at the level that we saw because of COVID-19. So at the end of the day, people have to make decisions about what they're going to do with their health. My personal view is, hey, I'm vaccinated. I think that the dangers of COVID-19 outweigh the potential for, side effects and things like that with with the vaccine. Yes, the flu numbers went way down. The flu numbers went way down. And the reason that they went down is because of how we were working to mitigate COVID-19. People were wearing masks. People were distancing themselves. So there's a bunch of publications and all those things out there that you can read about how flu cases went down. I was talking to a doctor the other day, right, that has a fee-for-service model, right, and nobody's coming to get flu shots anymore because the flu is down so much, right? So a lot of different issues, a lot of different diseases, right, have decreased over this time. But you have to make your own decision. My personal recommendation: don't get vaccinated, right? Still wear your mask, because right now if you adjust the vaccination rates for people who are not vaccinated, we're actually dealing with about the same rates of people getting infected with COVID-19. So my personal recommendation is that if, hey, you're going to not get vaccinated, wear your mask appropriately and stay safe, right? So, you know, these things are very complicated. They're very complex. You have a lot of, decisions to make with it. I encourage you to stay informed and use appropriate sources of information. Right, use appropriate sources of information when making your decisions, because there's far more misinformation and political information than things that are accurate and verifiable. At the end of the day, when I had a piece about taking the vaccine, and so I just went with that piece. Hey, you may not have that piece, and that's fine. But I've laid the information out before you to be an additional help so that you can make your decision. Hey, if you don't agree with science, I can't help you, right? You don't have to agree with what I'm saying, as I knew the majority of people in my audience would not. But hey, I'm a scientist. What can I do when you're a scientist and a pastor? It's very difficult. But anyway, you can look at those articles, those academic articles that I posted. Those are not they're not behind paywalls. You can read them for yourselves so that you can be informed. But hey, this is what I do. Check out my book on COVID-19 conspiracy theories so that you can properly engage sources. Just because you Google something, just because you see it on the internet, does not mean that what you are giving is secret knowledge or is true or is accurate. There is a thing called peer review that helps keep us from making errors. So you all have a good day. Be safe.